talk about something that does not get posted, something that does not make it into the highlight reel, something nobody really prepares you for when you decide to build something on your own, and that is loneliness. Not the dramatic, sad, nobody loves me kind of loneliness. I'm talking about the quiet kind. The kind that shows up in the middle of building something beautiful. The kind that sneaks up on a good day. And the kind that nobody warns you about because everyone is too busy telling you to chase your dreams, follow your passion, they said. Which is all great things, but they left out the part where you might be following it by yourself for a while. And honestly, this is kind of a continuation of my last two episodes, because in episode 1, I kind of gave an introduction and I talked about the difference between, a little bit about the difference between 9 to 5 broke versus business broke. And then in episode 2, I talked about uncertainty. So I've shared the money side and the mindset side. But today I want to talk about the part of entrepreneurship that lives in your chest. It's the relational part, the personal part, the part where you look up one day and realize the room got quiet. Because here's what nobody tells you. When you decide to grow, not everyone is going to come with you. And when you decide to build, some people will go silent. And when you decide to bet on yourself, some of the people you expect to clap for you and clap the loudest will say nothing at all. And honestly, that's the one that hurts. That's the one that will really humble you. Because you do not expect the silence. Yes, obviously when you start something, you expect the haters, you expect, everyone warns you about that part. But honestly, the haters are easy. At least they show up. At least they're paying attention. But nobody warns you about the silence from the people that you love or the circle that you had. The friend who stops asking how it's going, the family member who changes the subject every time you bring it up, the person who will like a stranger's post, a meme, save a recipe that you know they're never going to make, but somehow can't locate the thumb for the heart button to tap on yours. And you start to wonder if you're doing something wrong. You did nothing wrong. You just grew. And growth has a cost that does not show up on any invoice. So I'm going to be honest with you today. There is a difference between being alone and being lonely. Alone is a circumstance. Lonely is a feeling. And entrepreneurship will hand you both. You can be in a room full of people celebrating and at the same time feel lonely. You can have a solid revenue day and then drive home in complete silence. And you can have people cheering for the business while nobody then checks on the woman who runs it. Because here's the thing. People will support the brand and forget that there's a human behind it. And people will love the Empress and forget at the end of the day, she's still a whole person behind the title. And I'm not saying that to complain. I'm saying that because it is true. And we're unfiltered here. So I'm going to keep giving it to you straight and saying the truth. The loneliness of building is not about having no one around. Sometimes it's about being surrounded and at the same time feeling unseen. And sometimes it's about carrying a vision that nobody else can fully see yet. Because this is what a vision is. It's something you're carrying that other people cannot see. And this is literally what makes it yours. So when you try to explain it and people look at you a little confused, it's not a sign that you're wrong. This is a sign that it's still yours, but it's only yours to carry for now. Because carrying something alone, yes, it does feel heavy, and nobody warns you about how heavy that feeling can get. Nobody warns you that you'll make decisions. For example, me, I'll make decisions at 3 a.m. with no one to ask, and nobody warns you that you're going to celebrate a lot of the wins by yourself, and nobody warns you that you might break down and cry in the restroom or cry in your car, and then you have to walk back in and treat that patient and keep going like everything's perfect. And nobody warns you that the people closest to you might think you've changed. And here's the truth though, you did change, which is good. That's the entire point. You had to. The old you cannot build this. The old you was comfortable. The old you played small enough to keep everyone else comfortable too. And when you stop playing small, the people who were comfortable with the small version of you get uncomfortable. And that's not always because they're bad people. Sometimes your growth holds up a mirror. And sometimes your courage reminds them of the thing they have been afraid to do. Sometimes your yes exposes all the times they said no to themselves. And that is not your burden to manage. So let me say that again. Their discomfort with your growth is not your responsibility to fix. You are allowed to expand. You are allowed to outgrow rooms. And you are allowed to become someone the old version of your life cannot contain. But it will be lonely in the in-between, because the in-between is real. The in-between is when you have left the old you, but your new life has not fully arrived yet. The in-between is when you do not fit where you used to fit, but you have not yet landed where you're going. And that gap is one of the loneliest places a person can stand. But it is also one of the best and most sacred, because this is where you get to build. And you're built not in the applause, not in the crowd, in the quiet, in the alone, in the moments when nobody is watching you and you choose to keep going anyway. And that kind of brings me to the part that nobody claps for. Nobody claps for the days when you showed up and the schedule was empty and you're still like, I'm going to clean the rooms and still sit here and keep going. Nobody claps for the content you posted that flopped and you feel like you got 5 views. And nobody claps for the invoice you paid on time when you were questioning a few days before how this was going to be possible. And nobody claps for the boundaries that you set that cost you a relationship. And nobody claps for the night that you panicked at 3 a.m., wondered if you should quit, questioned all your life decisions, and didn't. You kept going. And those moments have no audience. And that's exactly why they build you. Because nobody can be disciplined when people are, because anybody can be disciplined when people are watching. However, in order to have a true business, you have to be disciplined when the room is empty. And you have to show up for yourself when there's no one to be impressed by it. And that is the difference. So now I'm going to talk a bit about boundaries, because loneliness and boundaries are very much connected. Some of the loneliness in business is not happening because of you. Some of it is because you are choosing your purpose, because building something real requires protecting your energy. And protecting your energy will make some people feel cut off. Boundaries sound like, I can't get on the call right now. I'm working and I have back-to-back patients. Boundaries sound like, I love you, but I cannot keep explaining my business to somebody who only wants to doubt it or has a negative thing to say for every suggestion that I'm making. Boundaries sound like, no, I can't do that for free. And yes, even though I've known you for years, I'm not able to do this for free. This is a business. Boundaries sound like, I'm not available for that conversation today. And boundaries sound like, you know what? I need to rest this weekend and not hustle and just relax. And every single one of those things will cost you something. A boundary is not free. A boundary will sometimes cost you, it can cost you a relationship, it can cost you an invitation, it can cost you an opportunity, it could cost you somebody's approval. But here's what I'm learning. The cost of no boundaries is much higher. The cost of no boundaries is burnout. The cost of no boundaries is resentment. The cost of no boundaries is a business that drains you instead of feeds you. And the cost of no boundaries is a version of you that is available to everyone and present for no one, including yourself. So yes, boundaries can feel very lonely at first, but loneliness is actually space. It's space to think, it's space to create, it's space to hear your own intuition without 10 other voices in your ear. And when you have a business, you need that space. You cannot build something real when you're available to everyone all the time at every hour. So now I want to talk about something a little bit tender, and that is grief. Because there is grief in growth. There is a quiet grief in outgrowing the people you loved. There is grief in realizing some friendships were built on a version of you that no longer exists. And there is grief in becoming successful and feeling like you cannot fully celebrate around the people who used to know you way back when. And that's not talked about enough. We act like leveling up is all roses and daisies and champagne and confetti, but nobody tells you it can also feel like you're attending your own going away party that you threw for yourself. But sometimes leveling up comes with a funeral. It's a funeral for the old you, a funeral for who you thought certain people were, a funeral for the life that felt safe but kept you small. And you're allowed to grieve that. You're allowed to be proud of how far you've come and still miss at the same time what you're leaving behind. Both can be true, both can coexist at the same time. And this is the duality that I keep coming back to in this business. These two things are true at once. You can be grateful and tired. You can be successful and lonely. You can be certain and be scared. And you can be free and responsible. You learn to hold both. And this is what ownership and business does to you. It makes you a person who can hold two truths without falling apart. But let me bring us back to something practical, because this is the Empress Unfiltered, not the Sad Girl podcast. So we feel it, and then we move forward, and then we lead. So here's what I'm learning to do in the loneliness. First, to start, I stopped expecting everyone to understand, because the people who have not built anything cannot fully understand what it takes to actually build something. And this is not an insult. It's reality. It's facts. You cannot ask somebody, for example, like who's never had a child, for parenting advice at 3 a.m. So stop expecting people who have never carried a vision to understand the weight of yours. And second, I'm learning to find my people. The other builders, the other business owners, the other people who understand and get what I say when I talk about the $35 day and the $6,000 in 2 hours, and the ones who do not flinch when you talk about chaos and overhead and manifestation in the same sentence. Because there is a difference between people who love you and people who understand you, and you need both. And sometimes you have to go find the ones who understand. And sometimes that means building new circles, because these people will not always be in your old circle. And sometimes your new level requires new conversations. And I'm also learning to stop abandoning myself so that I feel less alone, because that's the trap. When you feel lonely, it's tempting to shrink back into old patterns, to water down the vision of basically to stop posting because you're afraid it's going to flop, to stop sharing, to play small again, just so you can feel like you belong and feel safe. But shrinking to fit in is just a different kind of lonely. It is the loneliness of betraying yourself, and that loneliness lasts longer. So I'd rather be temporarily lonely on my own path that is mine than be permanently comfortable in a path that is not. And I'm learning to actually be with myself, to enjoy my own company, to trust my own mind, to make a decision and not need 15 people to validate it. And there's truth in that. And that took me a while to accept. The higher you climb, the fewer people are going to be standing up there with you. And that's okay. That's just how it goes. When you raise your standards, raise your prices, raise your vision, the room gets smaller. Not because you're better than anyone, but because not everyone is walking in the same direction you are. So, as an empress, you essentially have to learn how to feel alone without feeling abandoned. And not because you don't want support, but because you refuse to put your whole sense of self in somebody else's hands. And I'm going to say this for whoever who needs it today. If you are building something right now and it feels lonely, you're not doing it wrong. You're doing something most people will never have the courage to do. The loneliness is not a sign that you're off track. Sometimes the loneliness is the receipt that it's like confirmation from the universe, that proof that you're actually choosing yourself and you're exactly where you need to be. It's proof that you stopped waiting for permission. It's proof that you have stepped out of the crowd and into your own path. And paths get narrow and crowds stay wide. So if it's starting to feel like fewer people are next to you, it might be because you are finally walking somewhere most people are too scared to go. And that's not rejection, that is elevation. And now, does that make the lonely nights easy? Absolutely not. No. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that the feeling disappears because you reframed it. But because that feeling doesn't disappear, it stays. And there will obviously be days you wish someone understood, and there will still be wins you wish you could share with other people. And there will still be moments you feel like you're carrying the whole thing by yourself. But you're not alone in the feeling of being alone. And every successful business or successful person who's built something real, you got to remind yourself that they stood where you're standing. Every single one. The ones you admire, the ones you compare yourself to, even though realistically focus on your own path, don't compare yourself to others. But the ones who look like they have it all together, they've all had those quiet car rides home or those quiet moments where they've questioned everything. They've all looked at a booking system at some point and are like, oof, that's empty. And they've all had a moment where they wondered if anybody really sees them. So if no one has told you lately, let me be the one to say it. I see you. I know exactly how you feel. I see the person behind the brand. I see the one making the decisions alone. I see the one holding the vision when nobody else can see it. And I see the one being misunderstood by people that they love. I see the one who is tired but still showing up. And I want you to know that the loneliness is temporary. However, the character that is being built in this process is permanent, because when this season passes, and yes, it will pass, you will not just have a business, you will have a whole self, a solid rooted, can stand on their own self. A woman who knows she can be alone and not lose herself in the process, who does not need a crowd to keep going. A woman who essentially rebuilt something and built herself from the inside out. And that is the kind a person nobody can shake, because you did not just build a business in quiet, you built you. And that's beautiful. So tonight, if it's quiet, let it be quiet. That's okay. Don't panic in the silence. Let the silence make you strong. Make the decision, set the boundary, protect the energy, find your people. But stop abandoning yourself to feel less alone. Because the most powerful thing you will ever do is learn how to stand fully in who you are, even when the room is empty, and know that you're still that girl.